They thought it would be just another stop, another notch on their belt, another city to march through, shouting slurs, waving Confederate flags, poisoning sidewalks with hate. But Chicago? Oh no, Chicago was not the city to test. Not this time. Not on the South Side. It was early July when the so-called American Purity Alliance, a rebranded white supremacist group led by the dangerously charismatic Brandon Royce, announced their next big move, a national heritage defense rally. They called it their Great Awakening. Their mission? Reclaiming neighborhoods they claimed had been lost to outsiders. And next on their hit list? Southside Chicago. To them, it was just another battlefield. But what they didn't realize, what they never saw coming, was that this wasn't some sleepy suburb or scared small town. This was Bronzeville, Englewood, the beating heart of Black resilience, and home to a shadowy, highly organized local group known only in hushed tones as the Reapers. A name that made some laugh. Until it didn't. The official announcement came during a live stream from a dingy compound deep in rural Missouri. The camera buzzed to life in a dim room lined with twisted American flags and racks of tactical gear. Brandon Royce leaned toward the lens, eyes gleaming with fanatic energy. This year, he said, smooth and sharp as a blade, we take it back. Our country, our heritage, our streets. He paused for dramatic effect. And on July 3rd, we marched through the south side of Chicago, the place they said we'd never go. Comments flooded the stream like sewage. Burn it all down. Make them run. We're coming for them. And then came the promise that shook people to the core. We've secured full protection from the city, Brandon grinned. The police will make sure nothing and no one stands in our way. And in a sterile press briefing room in downtown Chicago, that promise was confirmed. Captain Eric Mason, a veteran CPD spokesperson, stood behind the podium with a calm, even tone. The Chicago Police Department is committed to upholding the rights of all groups to peaceful assembly. We will ensure safety on all sides. It was like pouring gasoline on a powder keg. In quiet corners of the city, families heard the news and felt a chill. In classrooms, on buses, in barbershops and churches, the same sentence echoed. They're coming here? It didn't matter how dressed up the message was. Heritage defense. Unity rally. It all meant the same thing. They were bringing hate right to the doorstep of Black Chicago. And yes, the city would protect them. But who would protect the city? There were no headlines about the Reapers. No official meetings. No public plans. But in the alleys and corners of the South Side, messages moved fast. And deep beneath a shuttered church, in a basement soaked in dust, memory, and rage, a man known as Dante Ghost Freeman rolled out a map. He didn't say much at first. Didn't need to. His presence carried weight, not because of fear, but because of respect. A former Marine, a tactician, a guardian of the block when the city forgot it. He looked down at the rally route, then up at his crew. They picked the wrong city, he said. And with those 6 words, a line was drawn. What the Alliance didn't realize, what their leader Brandon Royce couldn't see through his smug grin, was that every inch of that route had already been claimed. Not by law, not by flags, but by people. People who knew the cost of blood on the pavement. People who didn't need TV coverage or permission. They just needed a reason. And now they had one. The hate group thought Chicago would fold, that the police would shield them, the people would stay silent, the streets would be theirs. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Because behind the curtains, in the shadows of the city's oldest blocks, something ancient had awakened. And it didn't come to negotiate. It came to end this. Somewhere in rural Missouri, hidden among rusted barns and overgrown fields, the camera flickered on again. There he was, Brandon Royce, the self-proclaimed voice of the forgotten. The man who'd rebranded white supremacy into a twisted brand of nationalism and called it purity. Behind him, a wrinkled map of Chicago's South Side hung like a warning. Circles, arrows, routes marked not with hope, but with intent. We will reclaim this ground, he said to his viewers. This city has forgotten who built it. We're going to remind them. And thousands watched, cheering him on. Comments scrolled by like a sickness. Time to put them back in their place. Burn it to the ground. Take back what's ours. He smiled. He actually smiled. Like this was some tailgate party. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this very broadcast was playing in real time in barbershops, kitchens, and back rooms all across Southside Chicago. And every damn word was fuel. Meanwhile, across state lines, in a cramped precinct just south of downtown Chicago, the tension was already splitting seams. It was standing room only in the 1st District Police briefing room. The walls were lined with whiteboards, route maps, and scribbled deployment notes. The air was stale with sweat and nerves. Captain Linda Torres stood at the front, a seasoned officer with a reputation for keeping order, even when the city cracked. She flipped through her clipboard like it was a manual on how to survive a war she never signed up for. The American Purity Alliance has filed for lawful assembly, she began. The Heritage Defense Rally is scheduled for July 3rd. Orders from above. We are to uphold their right to march peacefully. That word, peacefully. It hit the room like a slap. From the second row, Detective Malcolm Pierce, a young black officer with sharp eyes and a tighter jaw, leaned forward. Captain, with respect, how the hell do we protect a hate parade? All eyes turned. Some nodded silently. Torres sighed, not out of disagreement, but exhaustion. Her face said it all. She knew. But before she could answer, Lieutenant John Becker, an old-school, by-the-book white officer, stepped in. We don't protect the message. We protect the law, he said flatly. If they have the permit, we do the job. Period. The room shifted. Uneasy. Split. That's not a job, muttered Sergeant Deshaun Carter, a grizzled black officer near the back. That's escorting a bomb into a neighborhood and praying it doesn't go off. Becker fired back. We hold the line. We don't write the laws. We follow them. And for a moment, it felt like even the fluorescent lights held their breath. Torres raised a hand, trying to keep control. There will be extra units. Riot gear. Negotiators on call. But we do not escalate. Pierce clenched his fists. Peace for who, Captain? He asked, voice trembling just slightly. This community's been under siege for decades. And now we're protecting the ones who want to erase it. Silence. Then a chuckle. Low. Bitter. A white officer, trying to break the tension with a joke that fell flat. Nobody laughed, because deep down they all felt it. This wasn't just another rally. This was a grenade with a countdown, and they were being told to stand next to it. Outside, Chicago carried on like nothing was coming. Storefronts opened. Buses hissed through intersections. Kids played tag between parked cars. But in quiet living rooms, phones buzzed with worry. Text chains lit up. Church groups prayed. Old heads warned, this ain't 1965. But it feels like it. And in precincts across the city, behind clipboards and badges, officers prepared for something they couldn't name. Something bigger than protocol. And back in Missouri, Brandon Royce ended his stream with a flourish. Southside Chicago. July 3rd, he said. History will remember who stood tall. He smiled again, clicked off the feed, and in doing so, he lit a match. But the man had no idea he was walking into a city already on fire. And the ones holding the flames? They weren't wearing badges. They weren't marching with signs. They were waiting, in the dark, with plans of their own. The buzz of clippers, the faint scent of aftershave, the rhythm of a place that had seen generations pass through its doors. JT's barbershop sat quietly on 63rd and Halstead, right in the heart of Englewood, plastered with posters of hip-hop legends, faded Polaroids from block parties, old high school team photos, and a sun-bleached portrait of Obama in the corner. This place? It wasn't just where you got a fresh cut. It was a pulse point, a newswire, a war room in disguise. But today, that rhythm was off. Something in the air didn't feel right. The big screen near the waiting bench had been playing local news all morning, the sound low under the hum of blades and chatter. But then came the breaking headline, in bold white letters. White nationalist rally approved for Southside. Full police cooperation expected. The room fell still. All eyes turned. And then silence. A sharp exhale came from Tyrone Bennett, a father of three, mid-40s, tired eyes, hands rough from double shifts at the plant. You serious? He muttered. They really coming here? He turned up the volume. And as the news anchor recited Brandon Royce's words from the night before, the energy in the room changed. Heavy. Charged. Taking back America, the reporter read. Reclaiming historic ground. Kareem Moore, a shop regular with a sharp fade and a temper like gasoline, slapped the armrest of his chair. Hell nah, he snapped. They think they can just roll up in here like it's theirs? Nah, man. This is our turf. Chairs squeaked. Clippers stopped. Eyes narrowed. And in the far back of the shop, half-shadowed in a corner chair, sat a man who hadn't said a word. Dante Ghost Freeman. Tall. Silent. Posture like steel. Eyes like a storm. You didn't need an introduction to know who he was. Some said he'd served 2 tours in Iraq. Others swore he'd once stopped a gang war by walking into the middle of it and saying nothing at all. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. When Ghost showed up, something was about to happen. And now, here he was, watching, listening, and letting the tension boil. Then, without turning his gaze from the window, he spoke. If they want smoke, he said, voice low and sure, they picked the right city. That was it. But it was enough. The room fell completely silent. Every man in there, young or old, broken or bold, understood exactly what that meant. Southside Chicago had seen gang wars, crooked cops, busted promises, and funerals too small for the grief they held. But this was different. This wasn't about turf. It wasn't about color. It was about something deeper. A battle for identity. A line drawn in blood and concrete. Ghost stood slowly. The men parted instinctively, like they were making way for a general or a prophet. He walked to the center of the shop, pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket, and laid it on the counter. A hand-drawn map, not just of the rally route, but the alley's rooftops, supply drops, safe houses. Every line had a purpose. Every mark was preparation. We're organizing, Ghost said, scanning the room. Eyes everywhere. Rooftops, storefronts, phones in hands. They think this is just a march. They don't know what this city's built from. Kareem leaned in. His voice shook, not from fear, but from fury. We ain't just gonna watch. Nah, we show him what Chicago is made of. And outside, as the sun dipped behind graffiti-tagged walls and battered porches, the neighborhood began to stir. Mothers whispered warnings over dinner plates. Teenagers passed news like currency. Shop owners exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. Miss Laverne Green, the elder from across the street, sat in her usual spot on the porch, her eyes sharp behind bifocals, her voice low as she rocked gently. They don't know where they at, she murmured. The barbershop lights flickered, but inside, something brighter had ignited. Not chaos, conviction, not lawlessness, legacy. Because while the outsiders had their chants and their flags, the South Side had something stronger. Memory, the kind that doesn't forget where bodies have fallen, or where hearts have stood unbroken. And as Ghost looked around at the faces in that room, young barbers, old heads, corner boys turned fathers, he knew. They weren't waiting on the police. They weren't praying for help. They were preparing. Let them bring their hate. Chicago would be ready. Beneath a forgotten church on the edge of Bronzeville, long shuttered, its stained glass windows shattered by time and weather, the basement lights buzzed to life. The space reeked of damp stone, mildew, and old sermons no one remembered. Dust hung in the air like breath holding still. And down there, in that cold, cracked belly of a building, they gathered. Not thugs, not gangsters, not soldiers, but something in between. They were the Reapers. And tonight, they were done hiding. At the center stood Dante Ghost Freeman, one hand splayed over a map spread across an old communion table. The same map from the barber shop, now creased and worn from hours of studying. Every street, alley, rooftop, and side door was marked, color-coded with chalk and ink. Ghost's voice broke the silence. Low, focused, sharp. We know their path, he said. They think this city is a stage for their performance. But it's our home. Every block, every brick, every soul. Around him, a dozen figures shifted quietly. On his left was Nova Miles, codename Viper, young, wiry, eyes like flint. A former EMT who'd seen too many lives lost for nothing. She didn't just fight, she calculated. They're marching blind, she said, tapping a section of the map. Overconfident. That's how we control the chaos. On Ghost's right was Jericho King, codename Razor, built like a freight train, face marked by a jagged scar that ran from temple to jaw. Once a bouncer, now something far more dangerous. He cracked a slow grin. They're walking straight into a trap, he said. A low chuckle rolled through the room. But Ghost raised a hand, and the laughter died. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about pride. This was about sending a message. Ghost turned back to the map and began assigning roles. His voice was steady, not raised, not rushed. Like he'd done this before. Like war was just another Tuesday. Nova, your team scouts the rooftops. East to west. Burner phones only. Jericho, lead Alpha team through the alley grid. No visibility, no contact unless I greenlight. He tapped a corner of the route, a choke point near an old corner store. That's where it starts, he said. If we do this right, they won't even make it halfway. The crew moved in unison, checking gear laid out on fold-out tables. No firearms, not for this stage. This was psychological. Smoke grenades, flashbangs, tactical masks, encrypted comms, first aid kits, and a black flag rolled tightly in a duffel, stitched with a white skull, the Reaper's mark. They didn't need numbers. They had precision. They had discipline. And most importantly, they had resolve. You understand, Ghost said finally. This isn't just about scaring them. Nova nodded. This is about erasing their belief that they're safe. Jericho flexed his fists. No mercy. Ghost shook his head. No witnesses. No mistakes. Get in. Get out. Leave confusion behind. Fear is our weapon. Let them wonder who we are. He paused, eyes scanning the room. But we know who we are. We're the last line. The line between them and the people they came here to harm. He held up a photo. A little girl in pigtails holding her mother's hand on a South Side block. This ain't about us. It's about them. The ones too young to understand why hate has a voice, and no one silenced it yet. The room went still. The weight of it all pressed into every soul present. Outside, Chicago slept. Streetlights blinked through the mist. Somewhere, a siren cried in the distance. But in that basement, hearts beat to a different rhythm. A war drum. And for the first time since the rally had been announced, the Reapers stood ready. Not with rage, but with clarity. Not for violence, but for justice, the kind you don't find in courtrooms. The kind that comes from protecting what's yours. Ghost looked down at the map one last time, then folded it with care. They bring hate, he said, slipping it into his jacket. We bring silence. And one by one, the Reapers moved out. Through tunnels, back doors, forgotten staircases. Like ghosts. Like a city's vengeance come to life. The sun had long dipped behind the skyline, casting the south side in a dim, orange haze. Streetlights buzzed to life. Shutters clanged shut. And the air, God, the air felt heavy, like something was holding its breath. The American Purity Alliance had arrived. Their vans rolled in like a slow invasion. Boxy, white, and cold. Windows blacked out, license plates taped over. They parked outside a rundown hotel that had once been a local gem. Now nothing more than cracked stucco and broken neon. One by one, the passengers emerged. Men in matching black jackets, tactical boots, faces pale, stiff with arrogance. Some wore bandanas. Others let their tattoos speak for them. Swastikas, Nordic runes, white power slogans inked like declarations of war. They had come prepared, or so they thought. What they didn't know was that they were already surrounded. Across the street, Miss Laverne Green sat on her porch, knitting in silence. Her eyes never left the vans. They don't know where they at, she whispered. That same phrase again. A warning passed like folklore. On the next corner, leaning against a lamppost in a dark hoodie, Ghost watched through a haze of breath and silence. Hands in pockets, ears open, eyes locked. Behind him, the Reapers had already taken position. Nova was perched on a rooftop 2 blocks east, camera in hand, silently relaying every movement. Jericho and his team were ghosts in the alleyways, hooded silhouettes slipping between shadows, waiting for the word. And then it began. A man named Zachary Quinn, one of Royce's junior lieutenants, stepped out the back door of the hotel for a cigarette. Camouflage jacket, tightly wound, nervous energy under all that bravado. He lit up, took a slow drag, leaned against the brick wall like he owned it, and then moved, just slightly. A twitch, a glance over the shoulder, a shift in the air, then gone. Not with a scream, not with a struggle, just disappeared, vanished into the dark like he was swallowed whole. Inside the hotel, nobody noticed at first. They were too busy pumping themselves up, chanting in low-rehearsed tones, talking about sending a message. But an hour later, the whispers started. "Where's Quinn? Anyone seen Zach?" They checked rooms, bathrooms, parking lot. Nothing. And then came the panic. The bravado cracked. Not all at once, but like glass under pressure. Did the locals get him? Is this a setup? What if someone's picking us off? Fear crept in. Not like a flood, but a slow, choking fog. Every shadow felt thicker. Every creak louder. A mile away, down a dim side street, the truth left a trail. A smear of blood. A torn glove. A broken glass bottle, its jagged edge stuffed with something soft and black. It wasn't a crime scene. It was a message. And Ghost. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was just the beginning. Inside the hotel, the Alliance's command room was unraveling. Maps were rolled up. Whispers turned to accusations. And Brandon Royce? The same man who boasted about taking back cities? He locked his door. Meanwhile, the Reapers moved like water through the city's arteries. They hit supply routes, slashed tires, intercepted messages. They didn't kill. Not yet. But they let them know, "You're not safe here." At dawn, when the city began to stretch its arms again, 5 more Alliance members were gone. No bodies, no witnesses, no sound, just questions and fear. The same men who came marching in with chants and swagger now stood in circles, clutching their phones like lifelines. One turned to another and whispered, "We're being hunted." He was right. But it wasn't just revenge. It was strategy. And Ghost, he was just getting started. Morning came, but it didn't bring peace. The sky over Southside Chicago was the color of ash, thick clouds hanging low like a threat. Even the sun didn't want to shine on what was about to unfold. Barricades snaked through the streets around Washington Park, steel teeth embedded in concrete. Riot officers lined the sidewalks like statues, shields up, visors down. Their faces? Blank. Cold. You couldn't tell if they were nervous or numb. Reporters swarmed like bees, setting up cameras, checking microphones, hoping for something that would make headlines, but secretly praying they wouldn't get caught in it. And behind them, rolling up in formation, came the American Purity Alliance. Like clockwork, their vans pulled in black and boxy. Their boots hit pavement one after the other. Flags flew, archaic symbols dressed up as patriotism. Chant started, low and steady. "Take it back. Take it back. Take it back." Over and over, the words drilled into the air like a war drum. Soulless. Rehearsed. The kind of thing people shout when they've convinced themselves they're right. Their leader, Brandon Royce, walked at the front, face stern, voice booming. You'd never guess he'd spent the night behind a locked door. Across the barricades stood the other side. Not police. Not counter-protesters in matching shirts. Just Chicago. Locals. Mothers. Teenagers. Old heads. People who lived on these blocks, who bled here, who buried their own here. No signs. No slogans. Just eyes. Watching. Waiting. And among them, unseen, were the Reapers. Ghost. Nova. Jericho. They had taken their positions before dawn. Nova, high above, surveyed the crowd from the roof of a shuttered bakery. Jericho crouched in a side alley behind a row of shuttered pawn shops. Ghost. He moved like a shadow between vantage points, speaking into burner phones, giving clipped commands. Hold position. Wait for the signal. Then, without warning, boom! A van, one of the Alliance's own, exploded 2 blocks down. A tower of flame shot into the air. Metal screamed. Glass rained down in shards. Car alarms went off like wailing sirens. The march froze. Panic rippled. Roy spun, shouting for order. Officers scrambled, unsure whether to advance or retreat. But the Reapers weren't done. Seconds later, from a drone high above, hundreds of flyers rained down over the street. Glossy paper, stark black and white. At first, people thought it was propaganda. But as the papers landed on sidewalks, on car hoods, in open palms, the truth spread like fire. Know your neighbors. Each flyer featured photos, names, home addresses, social media profiles of every known Alliance marcher. Exposed, doxed, laid bare, and at the bottom of each flyer, in bold red letters, "We see you. We know you." Phones buzzed. People screamed. The internet lit up like a lightning strike. Tweets, videos, TikToks, hashtag Know Your Neighbors was trending within minutes. Comments poured in. Nowhere to hide, huh? Let's see how brave y'all are now. Run. Back on the ground, the change was instant. Marchers looked at one another, suspicion flashing behind every glance. Some reached for their phones, desperate to delete what couldn't be erased. Others panicked, bolting into side streets, ducking into cars, peeling out. Rats from a sinking ship. Royce screamed over the chaos, trying to rally his group, but even his own men were backing away, eyes wide, lips trembling. It wasn't just about a protest anymore. It was a reckoning, and it had just arrived. Then came the brick. From the back of the crowd, a single arc, soaring through the air like justice. It struck a police shield and exploded into shards. And with that, the fragile order shattered. Protesters surged. Riot police formed a human wall. Shields locked, batons raised. But it was too late. The line had snapped, and chaos poured in. In the confusion, a lone figure at the front of the march, a man named Reed, Iron Jaw Collins, notorious for inciting hate in rallies across the country, was yanked violently from the group. 1 second he was marching, the next gone, dragged into an alley by hands unseen. And moments later, a live stream feed cut out as screams filled the background. Hours later, Iron Jaw's body was found suspended from a street lamp, just blocks from the rally route. His chest carved with a message. Wrong city. The media went into overdrive. Violence erupts at Chicago rally. White nationalist leader found dead in grisly display. Authorities struggled to regain control, but no one could say what was really happening, because the ones in control weren't wearing uniforms. They were wearing resolve, and masks made of shadows. The Reapers had struck again, not for bloodlust, but for balance. Brandon Royce sat behind a police barricade, pale, shaking, staring at the flyers still blowing across the street like ash after a fire. He had come to conquer. Now he couldn't even speak. And Ghost, watching from above, allowed himself a rare breath. Not victory, not yet, but momentum. The march wasn't over, but the myth of its power, that had just gone up in smoke. The hotel room stank of sweat, fear, and something worse, betrayal. It was the kind of thick air you couldn't clean with open windows. The kind that told you something had rotted from the inside out. Inside room 409, the American Purity Alliance had gathered, or rather, what was left of them. They'd come to Chicago, dozen strong. Now, they sat in tight corners, pacing, arguing, falling apart. Gone was the unity. Gone were the chants. Gone was the swagger. All that remained were red eyes, shaking hands, and the crushing weight of paranoia. The once proud rally organizer stood at the center, eyes darting like a cornered animal. He wasn't shouting anymore. His voice, the same one that had riled up hundreds online, now cracked like old vinyl. "They were supposed to protect us," he muttered, hands trembling. "We were told we had permits. Nobody cared. Not anymore." One man, tall, lean, with a clenched jaw and fingers twitching near his belt, finally snapped. "You brought us here," he growled. "You swore this city was weak." Another spat on the carpet. "We trusted you. You said we'd be untouchable." The organizer raised his hands. No one knew there'd be a group like this. He couldn't even say the name. He didn't have to. The Reapers. Their name wasn't written in headlines, but it was etched behind every stolen van, every missing man, every whisper in that room. Then came a sound. Click. Metal. Sharp. Final. A pistol drawn from beneath a jacket. Every man in the room froze. No screaming. No langing. just the cold understanding of what that sound meant. Judgment. The man holding the gun didn't shout. He didn't need to. He took a step forward. And then, fast, brutal, cracked the pistol across the organizer's face. Thud. The man dropped, blood at his temple, groaning, confused, humiliated. Before he could crawl away, two others grabbed his arms, dragging him across the floor. He kicked once, weakly, but no one helped him. Not one. They dragged him toward the window. Outside, a black SUV waited, engine running, rear door open like a mouth. The vehicle had been circling for hours, unmarked, unchallenged, waiting. And now, as the organizer's body hit the window frame, one man leaned in and whispered, "This is your legacy." Then shove. Glass exploded. Shards rained down. The man tumbled out, disappearing into the vehicle below. The SUV pulled away into the street, slow and smooth. No panique. No escrechintires. Just calculated silence. Back upstairs, the men stood still. No cheers. No fist bumps. Just the void left behind when trust is destroyed. They weren't fighters anymore. They weren't even allies. They were survivors of their own failed mythology. Across the city, police scanners were lighting up. Reports of missing persons. Reports of violence. No witnesses. No suspects. No clear perpetrators. But everyone knew. They just couldn't say it. At the rally staging zone, Brandon Royce stared at a wall of riot shields, eyes blank. A flyer flapped at his feet. A picture of his own face, name, home address in bold letters. "We see you." And now, so did the world. In police precincts and command centers, the conversation was unraveling. Officers once told to hold the line were now asking, "Where's the line now?" One rookie whispered to his partner, "Feels like we're chasing ghosts." And he wasn't wrong, because while the city had been watching tear, gas, and body armor, the real war, it was happening behind hotel doors, in alleyways, inside vans and basements and shadows. The rally hadn't collapsed because of pressure from the outside. It had imploded. What started as a march for power had turned into a fracture of fear, all because a group of people, disciplined, quiet, invisible, had said, "Not in this city. Not today." Back on the streets, footage of the SUV went viral within minutes. The leader jumped out a window. They purged their own. This is what happens when you bring hate into the wrong neighborhood. Some cheered, others condemned, but no one denied what had happened. The alliance was broken from within, and as the sun sank over the Chicago skyline, the Reapers moved again, not to fight, not to gloat, but to finish it, because one last piece remained. And Ghost, he was already en route. The air beneath the city was cold, damp concrete, stale exhaust, the kind of silence that vibrated in your ribs, not because it was quiet, but because something was about to happen. Deep inside a crumbling underground parking garage, lit only by the flicker of a faulty bulb, a chair scraped across the floor. Strapped to that chair, hands bound, hood over his head, sat the last man left. The final ringleader of the American Purity Alliance. He wasn't chanting now, wasn't barking orders, wasn't quoting heritage. He was breathing fast, uneven, like the fear had finally outrun the pride. And standing across from him, calm, composed, unreadable, was Dante Ghost Freeman. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just stood there, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other, eyes locked on the man slumped in the chair. "You wanted to make a statement," Ghost said softly. "Tonight, so do we." The man flinched, instinctively tugging against the zip ties. But there was no fight left, only the truth, and now it sat heavy in the room like smoke. Ghost stepped forward. The beam of the flashlight illuminated scuffed boots and bloody jeans. "You walked into our home thinking it was weak," he said. "You thought you were the only ones who could bring fear." He crouched low, not in anger, not in revenge, but in finality. "You wanted the city to see you. Now it does." Behind Ghost, the Reapers stood in silent formation. Nova, Jericho, others cloaked in shadows. No one spoke. No one moved. This wasn't a debate. This wasn't vengeance. This was a sentence, and it had already been passed. The captive mumbled something beneath the hood, Maybe a prayer, maybe a plea. Ghost didn't respond. He reached into his jacket, pulled the pistol free. The silence held. Even the city above seemed to freeze. Then, crack. One shot. Quick. Clean. The sound echoed off the concrete pillars like thunder in a tomb. The man's body slumped forward. Still. Gone. Ghost stood over him for a long moment. Not gloating. Not celebrating. Just accepting. Because this wasn't victory. This wasn't triumph. It was protection. It was the price. And they had paid it. One by one, the Reapers melted back into the shadows, like they'd never been there at all. No headlines. No statements. No names. Just silence. And a city a little less afraid. Outside, the morning sun began to rise over the south side. Warm gold spilled across rooftops, cracked sidewalks, the hushed hum of life returning to the block. Kids chased each other between parked cars. Corner stores reopened. The city exhaled. And in the newsrooms, reporters sat stiffly behind polished desks, reading carefully crafted scripts. Yesterday's rally ended in unrest. Several missing. Multiple injuries. Investigation ongoing. No mention of the Reapers. No mention of Ghost. No mention of what really happened in the alleys, basements, and parking garages. Because the truth wasn't printable. In the police command center, detectives stared at walls lined with maps and files. No leads. No suspects. No fingerprints. Just ghosts. One officer finally said it out loud. They came to spread hate and disappeared into silence. Back in the basement beneath the abandoned church, Ghost sat alone at the table. A black flag rested beside him, its edges frayed but still bold. Still standing. Across from him, Nova was polishing gear. Jericho leaned against a wall, arms folded. No one said much, until Nova asked, "You think they'll come back?" Ghost looked up, eyes sharp, voice even. "They won't." He stood, stretched, and walked to the cracked window. Beyond it, the city pulsed, imperfect, scarred, loud, alive. "No," he repeated, "they'll never come back. Anywhere. Because what happened in Chicago wasn't just a defeat. It was a warning, a message, etched in shadow, blood, and grit. You can march into this city with hate in your heart, but you'll never leave with it intact. Not if the Reapers are watching. Not if Ghost is near. End of story. End of the march. End of the threat.